Hello and welcome back to today's video. As you can tell, this is the Mafex Mark 50. I pre-ordered this like 2 years ago, so very happy to have it in hand, but very clearly there are some things that need repairing. I'll go over like all the bits. They're not like major issues, they're just like inconveniences. But the first thing you'll notice is how loose the neck is, at least on mine. I don't know if this is a common problem, but from reviews I've seen, or like the one review I've seen online, it seems like the neck is a little bit on the loose side. You can see how easily that pops off. So this is something I'm going to be repairing. Another thing I want to be repairing is the fact that there's like the odd loose joint. For me it's mainly the hips. I've had this before. This was with my Mafex 85 as well. It's just the little things that when you've got like this many bits to mess around with, you know, it would be nice having paid for it 2 years ago, had to wait 2 years, have it pushed back so often, and then have it finally turn up and it's not in full working order. You can also see there that foot comes off way too easily. And only that foot, the other foot was really difficult to remove. But you can see you physically can't move the ankle forwards either. Which if you could only move it forwards a little bit, that'd be fine. But the fact that that is as far as it goes, that's not good enough for a figure. It means you can't get him into much like leaning poses. As like it's pointless basically. So these are just the things I'm going to be fixing all the issues with. First thing is super glue. Then if you guys haven't seen this before, I highly recommend you get it. I don't know where most people get it from. I got it from eBay. This is just loose joint stuff. You squirt into the joint, you give it a move around, you let it dry, and it fixes the joints. So you can see here with the Iron Man spread wide open and his legs taken off, I'm just going to pump a little bit of this loose joint oil into the loose joints. So it's just a case of getting it in there, working it around, giving it a bit of a move, and you just want to try and get it so it coats the entire joint. And you can see I'm just checking where the other joint needs it. So it needed a little bit, so I went and topped up a little bit on the original one and the other leg. And now that that's been moved around and it's sitting there, I'm going to put that to one side and I'm going to fix the neck. Took a little bit of force to get that glue off, but I guess that's what you get for leaving the glue just sat drying for ages. So literally just going to put a little dab on the top of the actual ball joint itself, and then using just the top of that super glue applicator, I suppose you'd call it, just to work it around the joint so it gets full covering. And you don't want to put too much on, you don't want the ball joint to be huge, you also don't want it running down and mixing with other workings of the figure. You literally just want like a really thin layer to sit on top of that ball joint. Tolerances are really fine, and like even 0.01 millimeters will make a difference. So that's all you need to get. You can see I'm going to do the same to the ankle and hope that it holds it on a little bit better than it already is. It doesn't fall off, but again it would be nicer if it wasn't so easy to take off whenever you're trying to pose this thing. So just same method for that, and I'll put that aside and let that dry. And now we'll get on to fixing the actual foot. So as I'm very clearly showing here again, you physically cannot get it to move past that like standard 90-degree bend. Which is strange because it's got so much good range going backwards. I don't know why they removed any going forwards. They've also changed the whole setup from the Mark 85. The 85 worked so much nicer for articulation wise. But as you guys may know, boiling water is a main trend on this channel. It fixes so many things, and you can see just how much more range we've got just from a very simple trick of hot water. So comparing the left one to the original and the right one being what I've just done, you're going to fix this figure quite a bit, or fix the articulation quite a bit. Like you've at least got like probably another 20 degrees bend in there, which is easily enough to get him to stand up straight. So I'm going to show on camera how I did this. It's literally just heating it up and wrenching at that plastic, making sure like you don't force too much on the thin bit of joint, but pushing down so that it bends that extra bit of plastic in and around the joint. And then you're left with this. And again, it's not huge, it's not like Marvel Legends level of ankle articulation where it's going to bend up to nearly like, what, a 45-degree angle left. It's not going to go that far. But it's enough that when he stood up straight, he's not just going to fall over. And now that I've got this super glue dried on this bit, you can see I'm going to pop this neck on. And it's got a good bit of articulation. I didn't push it all the way on there, so that's why it came off so easily. So that's just me double checking that it is actually dry again before I put the joint on. Giving it a move around to make sure it's got the correct amount of articulation. I've not messed anything up in the process. And this has worked just fine. Now when I pull it off, the head will come off instead of the neck, but I can still get the neck joint off. Because obviously it's interchangeable with the Mark 85, so I do still want this to have an interchangeable neck, but I also want to be able to move the head around without the neck being the main thing that moves. Just personal preference when I'm messing about with figures. And one thing I didn't notice originally is how offset this crotch piece is. Like if you look at that, it isn't centered very well at all. As you can see, when you move the legs up, the leg on the left is just quite uneven, really. Like that peg was off at a kilter because the actual crotch piece that's been glued on was the wrong way. So once again, bringing the hot water back in, and I'm literally just manipulating it around until I can kind of twist that rubbery bit that's at the crotch around the actual solid plastic that connects all the joints together. I'm just trying to bend it a little bit like this, basically, just so it's not perfect still, because obviously it's been super glued in place at factory. But you can see now it's not quite as obvious as a difference. There is still a difference, but it's not like immediately noticeable, or at least from my perspective, it's not immediately noticeable. So now with all his repairs done, we can actually start to get on with the review. The first thing we're going to do is go over the articulation that I've added or altered. So you can see now you've got less of like a neck heavy articulation point. So depending on where you put your torsion on, you're going to get the head to move instead. This leg is a little bit better. I did go and put more of the joint oil on afterwards just to tighten it up a little bit more. But you can see these legs are a lot better now. They're not just going to immediately flop back down like they would have done before. The crotch is still a little bit wonky, but I'm not as bothered with that. And you can see the foot isn't falling off because the entire leg is coming off with it instead, which is a much better option. I'd much rather the leg comes off when I put on the foot than the actual foot comes off. And you can see we've got that forward articulation there. That means he can stand up without the issue of him falling back, because that was the first thing I noticed when I got him out of the box. I went to stand him up and he couldn't stand up in like a normal position because he would fall over. Obviously this is not a normal position, this is me just testing the extreme options of the possibility. But yeah, so I'll go over the like actual articulation of this figure, like the standard figure now. So you can get the head up all the way, you do obviously end up with that gap there. And you can get it back all the way as well. You can kind of chuck his chin down into his chest, I suppose. You get a good bit of tilt to the side. You can rotate. I would be careful with the rotation just in case it catches the paint. And obviously be careful you don't just pull the head off. But while the head's off, we can get a look at this neck joint, which is designed in a very similar way to the Spider-Man ones, if not the exact same way. So it's got a bend in it so that you can get the head to look up further up than down, which is obviously very useful for a character that swings or flies around like Iron Man does. Now here's something I don't particularly like. I don't like the way these shoulder joints have been done. I don't actually know how else you could have done them, but the fact that the corners of it catch under the socket is really frustrating. Like you can see me trying to get this back into place. It does eventually pop back out, and I've not had any paint chipping from this yet. It's just obviously frustrating that it catches. The amount of range you get out of the butterfly joint is really nice, and I like the way they've done it. You've obviously got this nice silver, still detailed chunk that comes out with it. And then up to 90 degrees all the way out. You've got your rotation at the bicep, which I'm not swiveling all the way around just because I actually don't know why I didn't. I think it was because I was worried I'd take the shoulder pad off if I did, but you can get full rotation on it. You can see just how far up that elbow bends. And you get your standard import joint going on here with the wrist, which is kind of hindered by that hand guard, so I've taken it off just to show you, but you get like that full range there. My only issue is it's slightly loose, so you'll see when I go to put this fist back on, the joint actually moves out the way, which is, it's a new issue. It's a new issue to me. I'm used to having joints that are too tight in the wrist, although Mafex are normally quite loose on the wrist, so I should have expected this. Not loose enough to cause an issue, just loose enough that it's a bit of a pain switching hands sometimes. So looking at the abs, that's as far back as you'll get. This is me checking the articulation at the top of the torso, and you can see using the hips as well, that's how much you'll get to the side. But using just the actual torso part itself, that's as far as the movement goes side to side. Then you've got your rotation down at the base, which will do a full 360, but you've got absolutely no rotation at the bottom, which is very, very strange. Yeah, looking at the crotch, you've then got this interesting kind of thigh swivel going on. So you've got the actual rotation at the ball itself, then you've got a separate thigh cut, which has a ball joint in it as well, by the looks of it. Then you've got the drop down we mentioned earlier. So moving it all the way up, and going out to the side as well, you get way up, but keeping it perfectly in line with his body. You get a nice 90 degrees straight out, you get way past 90 at the knee, and it's a very nice smooth kind of looking knee joint. Obviously quite loose to take off the legs, and at that point recording this video I did think I'd just broken it, but going all the way back, the loads back, obviously that's the forwards that I've added, because originally there'd be none, but then you've got your toe joint as well. You've got your little bit of ankle pivot, because it's on that weird ball joint thing, and you've got the rotation in there as well, so that whole joint rotates inside the shin. It's just a little bit stiff. You can also see I've sped it up because it's quite finicky trying to get it back into just a stationary pose. But looking on at what it comes with, you've obviously got the typical Mafex stand, you've got the wider grabber at the top here. You tend to get a thinner one for characters like Spider-Man or smaller characters. And this one's one of the clearer ones I have, some of them are quite foggy, but it works quite well. It did have to be tightened up, they're always loose when you get them, so always have a screwdriver handy to tighten up those joints. You also get these additional parts for this one. So you get a nice plastic rod that you could just stick straight into the base and have a stationary pose. Or you've obviously got the crotch grabber option, which attaches to that original stand. Or this one, which kind of seems redundant to me because it seems like the exact same thing. But anyway, you get all of those different bits for stands. And I was going to start with the big shield, but I changed my mind midway through showing you and put it straight back, and instead decided to go with the hands first. So these are the hands that just connect to the shield. You've got that nice big peg on the back. I keep all of my hands on the runners just because it's easier to manage them. You've then got a pair of relaxed hands, which look really nice. Then you've got the repulsor blasting hands, the just like clean hands with no peg on them. I really like the way Mafex do these, the eccentric ones kind of bother me. That was my lights cutting out and restarting, by the way, please don't worry about that, I had to change the battery over. But those are holding hands for the energy blade. Then you've got your repulsor blasting hands with the peg on for the actual effect parts. So you've then obviously got, I don't actually know the name of these, I knew all the names at one point. But these are obviously like the cannons you see in Infinity War, like when we first get a look at this suit. This is one of the first nanotech weapons we see. They're done very nicely, I like that they're separate on hovering plastic bases. So actually looking at the shield now, you can see this thing is absolutely huge. If we bring in Iron Man again just to show off, this thing is massive. The fact that this is taller than the figure itself and wider, he can hide his entire body behind it, and I love that. And then this is also quite a big shield, but bringing this in again, I love the way this is designed. It's very interesting to me that we got Takara Tony to make this for us, for the Figuarts, before any company released it officially, at 1/12 scale at least. But here you can see how those plug on. So they plug onto the fists, which is quite interesting. I always thought there'd be like a forearm attachment or something, but I quite like the way this works. And there you can see it plugs in quite securely as well. That's not going to go anywhere, it's not going to fall off. So then moving on, we've got this jetpack piece as well. I really like this. This was quite a nice hard to actually see. Interesting that Figuarts still never gave us any of like the actual accurate weapons and tools from the Mark 50. Then you get that massive jet booster as well, that burner that we see him use. And then we get the two, what would you call these, like the kind of grapple feet? I don't actually know what you'd call these things, but obviously the massive feet that lock him down to the ground when he's punching Thanos. And these have their own individual articulation in them, which I wasn't aware they had this much to them. So they've got whole separate like double joints in the back and the side ones. The front one's just a typical like toe hinge kind of style. But those are really nice. That means you don't have to worry about like ankle pivot, because obviously these make up for all of that movement. And then looking at this cannon, so this is one of the cannons that we did get with the Mark 50, but it was inaccurate. We didn't get an accurate version of it. I still don't think we've seen an accurate version of any of the weapons from the Mark 50 from SH Figuarts. Yeah, then we've got the nice big machete looking thing that he flies at Ebony Maw with in, again, one of the first scenes we see. And then we get, obviously, I feel like this is called the Qatar. I feel like this is the Nano Qatar. I can't remember what it's referred to officially, but I seem to remember it being called that. This is obviously the thing that he tries to stab Thanos with, and it doesn't end up very well for him. I seem to remember him using this in Infinity War, but I very much remember it being used in Endgame. Regardless, I want to just point out how nice the shading is on that blade. Like, just look at how nicely that darker blue is on the edge of the light blue. And just showing how this plugs into the hand. It's actually quite finicky to do, just because of the way the hand's designed. And you do want to be careful because it's very like thin plastic. But it works well, it fits quite nicely. Obviously again, the SH Figuarts one, when they did release this for the Mark 85, it was part of the hand. You couldn't take it off and have the hand separate. Which meant that only the right hand could actually hold it, from what I remember. But moving on to what I believe were called the power mallets. It's been a long time since I've actually looked at what his nano weapons were called. But we get one for each arm, which is quite interesting, because I kind of figured we'd only get one for each hand. Again, I bought this 2 years ago. I haven't really looked at the amount of weapons it came with since. In fact, I seem to remember being sat in the car park at the job I used to work at and pre-ordering this. But yeah, these are obviously the massive things that we see him use against Thanos as well, the massive hammers. And then we've got the rest of the repulsor blasts from the two floating sections from earlier. And these are done very nicely. I like the fact that you can see his hand still in there. And I like that they've kept them different from the other two that we see that look more like crab claws, which are these two here. I like that they've not just gone, oh, it's close enough that we'll just leave it being one thing. And the detail on these look amazing as well. Very nicely done, and you can see again, they are ever so slightly different, so there is one for right and left. And then we've got the repulsor effects here, those are the ones for the hands. I'm sure it's fairly quite straightforward as to how you attach them, but I'll show everything off anyway. So there you can see it just plugs on there. And then we've got the ones for the feet as well. These are slightly bent, but again, hot water is our friend on this channel, and it fixes almost every ailment. If we were to chuck that in hot water for a bit, it'd fix the little curve that's going on with that blast. So yeah, there you can see, just plugs straight into the bottom of the foot, and it looks really nice. It does a very good job. I prefer this to the SH Figuarts kind of anime looking fire effect. Now unfortunately none of these actually plug into the other effects. I think this would have been a very smart decision, making this like plug into the back of the those big hammers. Plugging into the front of this would have been great. I mean, if you force it, you can get this in, but it's very clear like just that bit too small. But if you're willing to force it, it will wedge and just stay in there. But yeah, obviously very much not designed to do that. I wouldn't recommend forcing it like that at all. And these ones as well, there were 3 weapons at least that could have been designed to hold the blast, which I think would have been quite a smart idea on Mafex's part. But at the end of the day, they've already given us this much. Like, I'm not going to complain about the few little things that could have been done better. So that's essentially the main part of the review over. However, I wanted to cover how you attach the majority of these, just showing how they work, how they look. Because I know that most of the reviews at the moment just have photos of the actual parts being on the figure after like a brief showcase. Hence why this video is half an hour long. I just really wanted to go in depth and show off this figure to its fullest. So here you can see I'm just having to bring those arms up and forwards. Realistically, I probably could have sped this portion of the video up, but I'm at the point of recording audio now, which is the last part of editing my videos, and that would mean going back and re-editing and shuffling the music, redoing the audio recording. So here we are. You're at this stage where I mean, you're welcome to speed up the video in post if you want. So here you can see him in pose with the 2 hovering cannons. Or I suppose the 4 hovering cannons is just 2 pairs of them. And I think this works really nicely. Again, you can see that articulation in the ankle that I've added coming into play there for the fact that his legs are bent and he's still able to stand up straight. Just little things like that would have been nicer for Mafex to have fixed to begin with. But yeah, I think this is a really nice setup. I don't actually know how I'm going to set him up on my shelf. I say that looking back at my shelf, seeing that he's currently just stood in a vanilla pose with all his effects behind him, kind of showcasing what he's got. But here are those 2 crab claws that I was telling you about earlier. These look really nice as well. These attach the exact same way as the last 2 did. So I won't be showing me attaching like all of the things that plug onto his arms because you've already seen it. They all attach on the same way, they're all about the same. There's none that are particularly difficult or none that are particularly like easy. Except for the massive hammers, those are fairly easy to plug on. But yeah, here you can see those power mallets. I think this is the one that he actually punches Thanos with in the end that makes him bleed. They look really nice, although I do think he'd look better with just 1 on at any given time. And here you can see those as well, just vanilla posed. It appears I forgot to edit out a nice chunk of pause there, but that's how long it takes to repose him. Here you can see that cannon, and now getting the wrist on, you can see there's a section for the actual guard in that hand. So it's just a case of trying to line it up with the little gap, which I've managed to do off screen, which I'm sure is really helpful for you guys. But yeah, just trying to line it up with that gap in between the actual forearm and the cannon chunk itself. Something like this I feel like could have just had the hand sculpted on the end. It doesn't need the articulation because you can't use it. This, however, I'm a massive fan of. I think the length on this works really well. It is also very sharp, so I'd recommend being quite careful with this piece. So the jetpacks, actually, that's quite a hefty bit of plastic on it. Now this machete piece as well, you can see, attaches the exact same way as everything else has, with the forearm interchanging, and works very nicely as well. It is, however, one of those things where it takes up quite a lot of space, so you kind of want to have it crossed in front of him, because if you have it out to the side or whatever, it's a good like 4-inch blade on that. So now showcasing that actual jetpack that I was mentioned earlier. I like to just kind of pry under where the butterfly joint is, just because I find it works out a little bit easier. And then the jetpack just snaps in exactly where the original one was. Doing a little bit of tweaking with the posing for bringing back on. But you can see that works really nicely. And obviously with the stand combined, it works even better. The only issue I found with the stand is it's quite difficult to get him held on the stand with this jetpack, just because of the way the jetpack's designed, it's quite hard to get those kind of like grips through. It's hard to get the clamp through the spaces. But anyway, moving on to the feet. So we'll start off with like probably the most difficult one, because you have to make sure his feet or his legs are in the right position before you do any of this. Again, very easy though, it's not too difficult. And once it's on, it looks absolutely incredible. So like, such an easy process and such good results out of it. It's a really nice streamline. You don't have to worry about like it looking like a separate piece. It looks like it's meant to have been there from the beginning, so I'm very happy with this. And then you can kind of stand him there like an Oscar, if you wanted to, I suppose. But now for like the main part of interchanging all of it. Here's those big two clamp feet that I was talking about. And they've got those massive hammer arms as well. This is possibly how I'll have him posed on shelf at some point. I might actually have him posed with Thanos for this specific scene. I'm really happy with how this specific setup of effect parts and additional accessories works with him. But yeah, very happy with that bit. Now on to just like interchangeable hands and bits that work with that. So the shield here you can see is actually fairly big, but it's also not too heavy, because you can see that even just with his 2 feet, no stand, and feet not particularly well posed. He stands up, he holds his own, he's not going to fall over and ruin it. Then the massive shield is meant to be on the floor anyway, so it kind of adds a third leg to it. And this pose works really well. You can see he's like fully engulfed by the shield. Like if I angle him properly, you can't see any of him from this perspective. So the shield is huge, and again it's got that nice like airbrushing around where you've got the darker blue into the lighter blue in the centre. One thing I do need to check is whether these all work with the Mark 85. I'm fairly sure they all do. But yeah, I'm fairly sure they all work with the Mark 85, but it'd be very nice to do a check, and just, because all those arms and legs come off as well, I think it's all interchangeable. Maybe I'll do a YouTube short finding that out myself. So obviously here's the energy blade with the actual holding hand attached to it. And this works really nicely. I feel like this pose in particular is quite intimidating looking. But yeah, it's kind of like more of the basic accessories. So I probably won't be using that one that much. It's also very thin, as you saw earlier, so I do worry a bit about that snapping. And then there's just the flying effects. So here's just a little photo I wanted to put in of the comparison between him and a bootleg SHF, which is about the same scale, about the same look. The bootlegs were fairly close from what I remember. I did own both at one point. But yeah, here's just all the photos now of poses I got him into. Hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I'm going to leave you with these photos. Subscribe for more. I will be doing modifications and stuff like that, and different upgrades. I do have a plan to upgrade this figure. Temporarily, it won't be a permanent upgrade. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.